There he is. Hey, Santo.
Hey Bruce, how are you going?
Good, good. Let me just briefly do the introduction. This is the Talamanca Review. It's 7:01 p.m. Thursday, the 7th of August, my time. And it's been a while, but we're going to have a relaxed conversation with Santo tonight. I want to also extend the offer of recording an hour with me for any listener who would like to do that, who has questions to ask me and who thinks those questions would make a good podcast. So, with that said, Santo, I'll let you begin.
Let me begin. Where do we start, Bruce? Where do we start?
Well, I'll start.
Start. We'll start at the beginning because I just find it fascinating the contrast that we're able to experience. Like we jump on these Zoom sessions, and you're on that side of the world, I'm on this side. For all intents and purposes, we're in completely different cultures, completely different environments,
Yeah,
yet we share something. And I think this is the sort of basis of what's happening now is figuring out what is it that we really share. And it's kind of causing some pretty interesting actions for people to take.
yeah,
Because I remember going back many years being obsessed by this and thinking that you literally needed to leave where you were and getting all caught up in the hippie movement and
yep,
setting up countercultures and actually living in Israel of all places on kibbutzim,
yep,
thinking that that way of community living was a better solution. And I feel we're going through a different phase of it now. I see a lot of people in the
yeah,
West jumping to South America or other places as expats
yep,
because in one way, they're absolutely right. They can see an internal demolition of the West happening.
yep,
But I feel that the solution is so individual that sometimes we're overloaded with information as external solutions and we jump at them. So figuring out how to be where you're meant to be is not as simple as it seems in a very noisy world where we tend to Google, where should I be, rather
right,
than contemplate, where should I be? Am I even in the right place now? Irrespective of everything else that's going on. Because it's
yep.
unbelievable what's going on. And I don't think it matters
Well,
where you are in the
let
world.
let's start there. What is unbelievable about what's going on? And of course, that's just me queuing up conversation. I could just as easily answer the question. Don't read any doubt in what I'm saying. Like, come on, Santo. There's nothing wrong. Not what do you mean stuff going on? You're being dramatic. No, you're dead on. But let's just define it for the listener. You do Australia, and then I'll do Canada.
Okay. Well, in Australia, we obviously are under a mind spell, that is being played out in the Five Eyes. We're one of those eyes.
Yeah.
But um, we've been conversing during this period, and you said, hey, you want to do a podcast? And I'm kind of mindful of the public aspect of conversing versus just having a conversation. Uh, but even that, I sent you that EU link where they want to check Signal and WhatsApp messages. Uh, they just want to scan them just to make sure you're safe, right?
Yeah.
So yesterday I thought, okay, I haven't been on the mountain because I live up on a mountain here. We're in a small community of about 400 households. And I hadn't been to the men's shed because that's fairly indicative of what you sort of call out as the baby boomer generation that's sitting there doing their woodwork, doing whatever, but it's around the cup of tea. When that cup of coffee, cup of tea comes, that their real That's their safe zone. That's where they feel they can really have their say. And I hadn't been to the man shed for a long time because I thought, I'm kind of tinfoiled hat and they find me amusing, but I was kind of squeaky wheel and and it was fairly typical to hear them talk and paraphrase the narrative of the time. They go home, they have their cup of tea, they watch the news on TV, and that's what they paraphrase.
Yeah.
And they would not even notice what was coming out of your mouth. They were so programmed. But I was in for a huge surprise yesterday, right?
Okay. Yeah.
They all agreed with me.
Huh.
They all agreed and went, yeah, Israel sucks.
Yeah.
What's going on in Gaza just sucks. Everything I said, every one of these old men agreed with me. I was blown away. So I
Yeah.
thought, how deep can I go? They didn't push back on one thing. So what that presents is people being people in
Yeah.
safe spaces, opening up the way they feel about something versus what you think people believe when you go to the supermarket and you see someone stroll down and think they're a program bot. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. But what I'm noticing is it's so obvious what's being done that even the baby boomers, we're getting it, Bruce.
Uh, Santo's not casting aspersions on me there. I have no negative opinions about the baby boomers. Um, well, yeah, I think that everything is becoming pretty clear now. When I started taking a public voice around, I'd say 2019, 2020, with these rather odd books I've written. Um, I remember doing 12 hours of interviews on a guy that really got the light of darkness because he was a practicing Buddhist. He had been in the UFO movement for years, was good friends with a lot of the top researchers in that field. And he'd also awoken to let's call it the Zionist agenda. Okay, so he had all these things going way ahead of his time, which was the perfect guy to read and interview me on The Light of Darkness. And although it's not a feature part of The Light of Darkness, A Warrior's Tale for Our Time, published in 2020, you can extrapolate from it through what I'm saying that everything that's going on in the world is leading to the third temple of Solomon. So, like I said, I did 12 hours of interviews with this gentleman. And for about 4 or 5 of those hours, we talked about the Temple of Solomon, and nobody got it in 2020. Nobody got it. It was like David Icke talking about reptilians in 1994, right? Getting humiliated on the Wogan show on the BBC. Um, Nobody was getting it. Now everybody gets it. This is all about the temple. It's all about the temple. Now, I find myself in a curious position. I think through the laws of what I would call fairness and balance that they deserve the temple. Excuse me. They deserve the temple at
Absolutely.
this point. I think there's a lot of people in that community who are not part of Murder Incorporated and who are good people, and that temple is central to their culture. It doesn't matter what we think about it. I think blood ritual as a pseudo spiritual expression in the 21st century is absurd. But what does it matter? It's important to them. And they've paid every toll, every due, every tax, and every gratuity in the last 300 years to get this temple built. And so I'm in favor of it. And it will also close out the Abrahamic narratives, um, because I don't think very much of the stuff that is prophesized is really going to come true. Um, unless we're looking at it 3 or 4 degrees off, right? So the Antichrist might be full artificial general intelligence. Who knows, right? There may be expressions of it in our event stream that we can say, yeah, that's a match. And we weren't interpreting it right, what they were saying in the Bible. But for the most part, I don't think it's going to come true. But I do believe that the Islamic world should give up the Alaska Mosque and let them build their temple. Now, the temple is a horrible thing, but we live in a free will space, okay? And the only way I can see for a new consciousness to emerge, a new baseline for whatever remnant of the West is going to survive what we're going through, um, is to clean out the old stuff, to clean out all the Age of Pisces stuff and move into a new spiritual paradigm. And for that to happen, it's like boxing. A new champion is not crowned until the old champion is beaten. And so this is what we're going through. And I'm just sort of patiently watching it, lovingly watching it. I don't get too angry anymore. I don't get too upset. Um, I've made my peace with what we call death. It's a very painful experience for the living, for the people who give up their body. 99% of them after 3 minutes on the other side would not come back if you offered them anything. It's so beautiful on the other side, even in the lower heavens. But the torture and the degradation of the living consciousness that we're being forced, literally forced, like Malcolm McDowell in Clockwork Orange, with our eyes forced open, getting drops. We're being forced to watch this IDF snuff film in Gaza, and it's a snuff film. I mean, the stuff that's finding
Yeah,
its way onto the internet, 10 years ago, it would have been shocking to see that stuff on the dark web. Now it's just mainstream. And there's this constant degradation of consciousness as it regards our valuation of human life. The solution I
yeah.
found is to go to a higher valuation of spiritual life. Don't see the end of the physical vessel as some inconsolable tragedy. Just try to see that the beings that came into those bodies came in to do something and they've done it and now they're leaving. And I even feel that way about the kids who get sacrificed. I think those are, just as we have warrior human beings like Alexander the Great and Genghis Khan, there is such a thing as a warrior soul. A warrior soul will come in, go through that process of being raised till they're 5 or 7 years old and to be sacrificed. And they knew before they came in that was going to be done to them. It's a lot to ask of people to extend their consciousness to this over the border of life and death, to view life in a rational way. Because if you have no experience in this, my fundamental thesis is irrational if you're just looking at life from sense mind 3D reality. But if anything, I hope the Talamanca review has convinced people that it's not the case. 3D is just the most compacted, accessible, and communal experience we all share while we're incarnate. Um,
Mm.
yeah, that's how I feel about it.
Yeah,
But the temple, the
I, I,
te
I feel there's another layer to the game that's been made more obvious now, but it is not obvious at the same time. In other words, the clarity around what you said was ignored in 2020, namely the third temple. I even brought that up in the men's shed yesterday. No problems. Everybody saw it, no issue. But I think what it is the game itself has multi-layered, and we have to consider the factions at play. And so at the same time that there's this side of game, this faction, which is this one that's playing out heavily in the media and heavily through Gaza, etc., there's an almost opposing faction with a particular agenda, namely the transhumanist uh, sort of transforming the human at a, DNA level, MRI through these technologies and
Yeah.
transforming the mind. And they're just as committed to an outcome. And that kind of helps explain the confusion that happened with Trump because there was a very WEFA, World Economic Forum kind of agenda being sustained and pushed by a particular faction. And then this bloke comes in that's not of that ilk. But everyone could see that he didn't represent the transhumanist agenda. Everybody could see that these, a man's a man's, a woman a woman. Some of these woke principles would be revoked. Some of this climate change stuff will be revoked. Everybody could see that. But what they didn't see, which is becoming apparent now, was his alignment with the other faction.
Yeah.
And as soon as that came to the surface, everybody gets super angry. And you go, well, dude, if he's not in that faction, he's in another faction.
Yeah.
So unless you can come up with an explanation of a powerful
It,
faction and it's a three-way game, he's in
yeah.
that faction.
I mean, if you're pretending you don't understand what's going on now after he moved the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem in 2017, you're just being obtuse. It's
Yeah, but
it's
he's gone in balls all now, and
oh
it's
yeah.
really obvious.
You
But
see
but
you see
what's
the
even more interesting
the appointment of
is,
Judge Judy is she's an attorney general now. I forget. I think for the District of Washington D.C. she's a federal AG. She's going to be going back to prosecuting. She was a judge. And she announced
yeah,
today one of her number one priorities is combating anti-Semitism, and it's rampant in the United States, and she's going to prosecute. So, I mean,
yep.
but like,
It, it
look,
it's pure entertainment. Arnie will be back. Arnie will be back, and he'll be appointed as like what was that movie that showed the ridiculous nature of life, whatever it was. I forget what there was this doco movie that you thought it couldn't be real. But the way they portrayed Idiocracy, I think it was
yeah,
called.
yeah,
You remember Idiocracy? Yeah, the way they portrayed the absolute kind of distorted entertainment expression of what could be called the system, the government. We're there now. So I would not be surprised if
yeah,
Arnie suddenly comes out of the woodwork and he's all dressed up and he's coming to fight for whatever he's got in his bloody bag of tricks, right?
yeah,
Whether it's Judge Judy or Arnie, it's pure spectacle wrestling on steroids. That's
yeah.
all it is.
Well, I think it's given the jail terms that are going to be coming, I think it's more like the Colosseum without being decimated by a sword, you know. But it's a version of the Colosseum in which the public consciousness is literally been whipped up to a bloodlust, you know. Now,
Exactly. But what's interesting, Bruce, is that what's coming out is regardless of which side of which faction they decided to join or give their drop of blood to, this Epstein thing is revealing that it didn't matter which side, which faction they align with, they're compromised. And
yeah,
that's really fascinating because they're
yeah,
kind of protecting each other, even though they're fighting each other. And it's like
yes,
it's a house of cards. It's got to
yes,
come down.
yes, yes, that is very interesting to note as well, that I think Trump has been outed as a pedophile. I believe it. I believe perhaps he has repented in some measure. I've been very consistent in my opinion going all the way back to 2016 when I watched Trump mow through everybody in the Republican primaries to gain the leadership of the party. Um, my position has been remarkably consistent. I said he's probably going to win. It represents a descent into a new level of political absurdity. And I said, watch for an overt shift toward the Zionist agenda. Now, where this fits in globally, I'm not quite sure. You can fill in the blank, and you got anybody listening can make the X in the calculus variable whatever you want it to be, to give you a few ideas. Is this a battle between, let's say, the atheistic globalists who want to bring in a form of global communism and the religious globalists who want to bring in Noahide law and rule from Jerusalem? By the way, that's the one that seems most likely to me. And it's interesting that the religious globalists could not have accomplished the last 35 years of the globalist agenda without cooperating with the humanist globalists, the communist globalists. And that's very interesting to note. So, having just finished all 8 seasons of Game of Thrones, there's that moment, where all enmity between potential monarchs can be put aside for the common battle of fighting the undead. If for those of you who've seen the Game of Thrones, the White King and the undead, the Night King and the undead. Um, and Cersei Lannister uses the opportunity to gain more control. We're in the Game of Thrones phase of the Age of Pisces now, and it's fascinating to watch. Now, another thing I have been saying since 2016, after he got elected, and after about 6 months of watching him in office, I said, look, there's something going on with this guy. It's like he's suffering from a divine affliction. Okay. What do I mean by that? I don't think Donald Trump can push or sell a lie. So if he opens his mouth, you're going to hear a lie. But the result of every action, including his blatant cozying up to the hardcore genocidal Zionists now, is actually revealing the truth of the world we've been living in for at least 100 years. At least 100
Yeah.
years, okay? And because the power in this particular group, the religious globalists, um, it existed before World War I and World War II, because whether you realize it or not, the world is run by ritual magic at this point. It wasn't always this way.
Yeah.
There was a time in the past, this might be the case in Tartaria, when a higher form of wizardry or sorcery, which would be a high science and magic, it coexisted. And that would be the free energy phase, the Tesla phase, the air balloons, and the magnificent construction, possibly sound-based levitation technology to move 20-ton stones up 300 feet in a cathedral. That was an age of wizardry, and in the age of wizardry, the wizardry was openly revealed. In the age of ritual magic, they have done their very best to convince us that we live in a rational world, despite the fact that the literal and diametric opposite, ritual magic, is governing the world, which is the principal difference between the age of wizardry and the age of ritual magic. Now, in this world of ritual magic, the religious globalists, who everybody knows who they are, right? Um, they are in control of everything. And the principal magic controlling the world, and it is a magic, by the way, is money. I've gone out of my way to
Mm.
explain this to people on the Talamanca Review. And, people are fascinated with these weapons displays, whether it be Kim Jong-un doing a military parade in North Korea, or whether it be us watching YouTube videos of Richard Dolan telling us about secret Air Force technology based on reverse engineering and, all of these sorts of things. Wow, to the point where you look at the present stalemate in the world and you wonder, well, do we have weapons beyond nuclear now? And you just don't know anything anymore. And the reality
No.
is the greatest weapon of the last 400 years has been money ever since the first central bank of significance, which was the Bank of England. It also demarcates the transition between a Vatican-run Europe and a Protestant Jewish-run Europe, where you can sort of leave the Protestants aside and really, but the Kabbalistic core of the Protestant world is Freemasonry. Whereas Catholics and
Mm.
were not really allowed to enter into Freemasonry. And then in the 20th
Yep.
century and just before in the late 19th and the 20th century, we get a proliferation of Masonic religions. And these are created by, propagated by, and sustained by high ritual magicians of a 33rd degree in Masonry. And here we're talking about
Mm.
Mormonism, which is an absolutely evil religion at its inner core. Okay, if you go to
Mm.
temple and you enjoy the community of Mormonism and the values in the general population of Mormonism, all the power to you. I actually think it's a very beautiful culture at that level. I'm not trying to offend you, but please try to understand that at the very core, in the inner temple, in the holy of holies of the Mormon Church, is the same insidious child sex, bloodletting, ritual culture that is at the center of the religious globalists. You get Jehovah's
Yep.
Witnesses, which is another Masonic religion. Then you start to get the really weird stuff. Then you start to get people like L. Ron Hubbard, really derivative of Aleister Crowley, a ritual magician, probably one of the greatest Gentile ritual magicians. Although I suspect that the
Mm.
real heavy-duty magicians never, ever, ever take or want to take public stage. Okay?
Mm. Mm.
So, but for the plebe, for the pedestrian, Aleister Crowley is the preeminent ritual magician of the 20th century. And from him we get, in some measure, Jack Parsons. And this ritual culture and ritual magic, it goes into NASA.
Yeah.
Okay? The people need to
Yeah.
understand it goes into NASA. And then you get Scientology, and there are beneficial things about Scientology as well. Like I said,
Mm.
Hubbard came up with some very unique insights into technology, and I think foreshadowed in some measure how technology and spirituality are going to coexist together in the future. And he just
Yep.
used mild electric shocks to reprogram the
Yep.
brain. And I think that's going to become a bigger thing in the 22nd and 23rd century as we try to truly try to rehabilitate people rather than throw them in for-profit penal institutions. So this is how
Yeah.
I see the
Yeah.
world
If
going
it,
now. And the temple, now the one thing they all have in common, the ritual magicians, is they want this temple built. You have to hear what they say
yep.
in a Masonic lodge. Until the temple is built, until the temple is built. They're basically Gentile Jews. Okay?
Yes. Yes.
I pass
Yep.
the ball back to
Yeah.
you now
See,
in this conversation, sir.
yeah, see, it's interesting. Everything you said, what I was visualizing metaphorically is they've all been contributors to this metaphoric Tower of Babel. And it's
Yeah,
been built. It's been built, it's been built, it's been built. But you needed an Aspergic type president like Trump
I need a definition on
to
that, aspergic, please.
Aspergic as in not quite autistic, at the level of
Derivative of Asperger syndrome?
yes, yes.
That's all I need. Thank you.
Uh,
Please continue.
Yeah, yeah. So this Aspergian president who can't help but be transparent. In other words, whatever's wherever comes out of their mouth. You need that. But that provides the opportunity. It's like that game, the Tower of Babel. You know that game where you build it and then you pull out a piece at a time without making the whole thing come crashing down. Right? So to me, the people that are doing the little easy bits pulling out are the Tucker Carlsons and the Candace Owens and the Alex Jones and all these people can see the Tower of Babel, but they're picking the easy pieces. They're
Yeah.
picking the because they don't want the temple to crash
You
on
know
them,
why?
but they want to destabilize the
No.
tower. So,
But
sorry,
do you know why they're ultimately ineffective?
why they're ultimately ineffective? Let me think. Well, they themselves have got to sort themselves out first because they're still imbued in one of the factional gains until they're completely neutral out of it. That is obvious with the Tuckers and the Candaces. In other words, how can you be stuck in the Catholic faith? This is the problem. A lot of them really have good intentions. You could say Trump has got good intentions. Everyone's got good intentions, but you've got to tie it back to what are you entangled with? And a lot of these people haven't really sat back, taken the time to go, what am I personally entangled with? In other words, they are doing good work as they pull out a block for the masses, because most of the masses won't go near the Tower of Babel. They just want to stay away. Whereas at least they're prepared to go there a little bit like the Talamanca Review. I don't know how high up the tower or where you're going. You're probably picking them off the top, to make sure it
Yeah.
doesn't come down. But as you get more courage, you start to tinker lower down. Now, eventually, there'll be enough people around this tower to pull out enough pieces and it'll suddenly come down. And that'll probably coincide with when the temple is built. In other words, this transformative period of one thing crashing down and something else coming up. And you're kind of like, what the hell just happened? That's
Yeah.
before you get into the cliffisms of this M1 Atlas and the aliens are coming and, we got to
Yeah.
manifest the Mercedes before they get here.
Yeah.
It, it's getting pretty wacky.
Don't you blame Heidi, Santo. Don't you blame Heidi.
That's it.
Um,
Infighting
God,
with
God,
her
God's,
astrology
God
charts.
bless him, for finding love, and I'm happy as can be for Cliff. Um, Very lucid podcast the other day. It was very interesting. Um, yeah, so I think one of the reasons that they're ineffective is they still are. Look, we're getting this class of media figure now that is pretending to be an exile. I go to the etymology of Stoic and Cynic. So when Rome was becoming really corrupt, the Cynics would leave the center of the city and go live on the outskirts because they couldn't tolerate the corruption of Rome anymore. And the Stoics were the ones who stayed. So this is the origin of the words Stoicism and Cynicism, and which are antipodal, by the way, they're opposites. Now I think Tucker and Candace are false cynics. And the reason I think they're false cynics is because Rome is a conceptual structure now, and it has to do with nobility, title, and the ability to make money in excess of $1 million a year. And that's a titled person in the American system. I hereby do knight you, Sir Tucker, Sir Tucker, m- Dame Candace. They're knighted personalities in the monarchy-like cult of celebrity, and the change is not going to happen from within Rome. It's going to come from without, and that's why they're
Mm.
ultimately ineffective. You know, um,
Where,
but
where
yeah,
do you place Alex Jones in that? Where do you place Alex Jones in that
Alex
thought process?
Jones Alex Jones will not directly speak against Zionism.
No.
He won't, okay? I think he paraphrased something that Trump said just before he got elected. He was being interviewed and somebody asked him about the Jews, and his answer was a very curious one. He said, "Well, the thing you have to understand is there are good Jews and there are bad Jews. And that's true too. I mean,
Mm,
this is a fully formed world. You've got Jewish people living the make the world a better place because the Jews invest in the world. They're not looking
mm,
to go to someplace else while they're here. They're investing in the world and they've done a lot of good. Some of it is a little self-serving, I'd say, but they're very hardworking. They probably have one of the highest per capita cultural graduate levels in science and engineering, and we find them in all quarters of the intelligentsia, although sometimes they don't really belong there. I cannot now, nor can I ever imagine a time in my life where I genuinely regard Yuval Noah Harari as an important intellectual of the early 21st century. Now they used to hit the mark a lot better. I would not want to debate Norman Mailer in 1978. I would not want to
mm,
debate Noam Chomsky, but they've always produced these very public, very intelligent people. Um, but even that seems to be falling away a little bit now.
yep,
Continuing with the example of Yuval Noah Harari, he seems to have attained his notoriety by some ritual magic wind in his sails, let's say. Okay. I think, quite frankly, he was one of Klaus Schwab's catamites. And this world that's coming is run by sodomites and catamites, folks. Okay. Now, let me take a moment to say something about this because this is a topic that most people usually avoid because it's extremely distasteful and it's extremely offensive. Um, Fortunately for you, I have no such limitations. This is the key aspect of the dark yoga of the West. So if you look at the entire chakra systems, the ones that go to light are the forehead and the crown. Okay. The other ones can give you various feelings. Um, but the lowest chakra is the anus. Okay. And there's no other way to say it. I have to be direct. Anytime you find a human being fascinated with the anus, whether it occur in heterosexual relationships or homosexual, realize you're dealing with a relatively depraved human being. Okay? Because so much of their attention is focused on the excretory chakra. This is the chakra to excrete the garbage from the body. Okay? And it produces continuous fascination and utility other than its normal biological utility. Utility of this chakra produces a unique consciousness adjacent to the light holder, but multidimensional. This is why you see it in all of the mind control programs, especially the programs that begin with infancy. It begins by penetrating the anus at like 1 month old, 6 months old. It all focuses on the root chakra. Now, remember what I said in The Devil in Us. The anus is the devil's chakra. Okay? Now, that's all I'll say about that. I could do a whole podcast on dark yoga, but keep that in mind when you consider all of these people governing us. Justin Trudeau, Emmanuel Macron, Klaus Schwab, Starmer is an open homosexual in the UK. Why are they all living through the anus? Why are all the leaders in the Western world governed by the root chakra? Because this is the laity of the ritual magician and the ritual magic cult. The laity are And welcome back, Santo. We had a brief interruption there, ladies and gentlemen. I gave up my Zoom subscription because it wasn't pertinent to my job anymore. So I hit the 40-minute mark there, right in the middle of one of the better diatribes to come about on the Telemanker Review in quite some months. But I remember exactly where I was, and I will pick up, okay? So we are governed by people obsessed with the root chakra, and that should alarm you. And this is why so much effort has been put into the LGBTQ movement for 70, 80 years, or really since about the late 80s was the final push. And this is, I mean, and they never miss a moment to tag on it, right? Like Justin Trudeau characterizing people who did not want to get vaccinated in 2021 as anti-LGBTQ, misogynist, and and so they try to shame you with this invented morality when it's in actuality the inversion of morality. Balanced people function at the higher chakras. When I meditate, I focus here, okay? When you leave your body, you feel yourself going out the crown, okay? You know that 22 grams they talk about leaving the body at death? You can feel that in meditation. You never go out your ass, okay? And I mean, I'm one of the few people that will really kind of get into this and talk about it because it is such a distasteful topic. But it is the root, if you'll pardon the pun, of the laity of the left-hand cult that governs us, okay? And
Yeah.
Santo, you want to pick up?
Yeah, well, that I think is becoming abundantly clear.
Do you?
And you said it. Yes. And you
Now,
had a rather
let me qualify this. How do you see that becoming abundantly clear? I see it now. So there are legitimately gay people, that 1% of population that are born
yeah,
gay, demonstrate homosexual tendencies before puberty, never sexually abused by a relative or a babysitter.
yeah,
They're gay. Gay happens.
yes,
I'm not a caveman. But even they're getting it now. They're forming
yeah,
groups like Gays Against Groomers and
exactly,
they're
exactly.
gays
I think
lesbian women
it's
are some of the
becoming
most
clear. It's becoming clear because what is becoming clear is that those that are human that don't have this trauma or program interference are just going enough's enough. Those that do have trauma and programs are being triggered. And you can see that very actively happening. But anybody that's got fairly clear their traumas and wasn't heavily programmed is regardless of what their belief systems are, they're going, nah, this doesn't add up. It just doesn't make sense. And they just know that it's not right.
Yep,
So there are more and more people that are either actively working on being realistic about facing themselves and their traumas because they know that they're being triggered. So rather than fight it, that's why they want people to fight because they don't want people to go back to their own issues to clear. And that's why the MK Ultra programs and these programs are very subtle now. And there's so many new versions of them in
yep,
order to keep people locked in the black box,
yep,
to keep them in that, whatever you want to call it, the matrix. But what you were saying before, and that's why I think Candace is doing a good job with her expose of Brigitte Macron and the
yep.
Macron
Agreed.
narrative. And
Agreed.
she's putting it straight on saying, as a human, even though I'm a Catholic, this stinks, right?
Yep,
And it just, you can tell that it repulses her,
yep,
right? She attributes her approach, a bit like Trump's Aspergism, to her grandfather. And she says her grandfather gave her that ability to understand that truth comes first. A handshake is all you need. And you think we've lost that. We're so programmed and confused. But
yep.
one question I would ask you, we went through these various people and what they're doing and Towers of Babel, etc. is where do you think um, the David Icke and the reptilian agenda fit into what's going on now?
So I think, it's funny you bring that up because I did a bit of what is it, Thursday? Yeah, this week. I did a bit of research this week on that very topic, and I went back and watched the last few episodes of William Tompkins. He was 95 when he died. His breakout interview was with Kerry Cassidy about 10 years ago. Was it 10 years? Yeah. I think he's been dead about 8 years now. So he interviewed with her when he was 94. He worked at McDonnell Douglas and a few other defense contractors and was an open human liaison to the Nordics and was in meetings with ETs and um he wrote a book called Selected by Extraterrestrials, and they asked him, the people in the secret space program, to write the book. But when you listen to him, it becomes clear that he's not programmed. Okay, I don't think at 95 years old the programming would hold, because I think the normal wear and tear on the body and the mind, the normal things that happen like forgetfulness and dementia, and I don't think he would have made it to 95 years old if he was programmed, okay, if he went through MK Ultra. So I, for the
Hmm.
most part, believe him. Now, the only area I deviate on is he said that the Draco reptilians didn't come into the human experience until World War II, and the Nazis made a deal with them. And I'm sitting there going, William, how do you explain the blood rituals in Judaica? How, like, there's this, like, I don't know why people find this so hard to talk about. Well, loss of income, getting fired, publicly shamed, but that's all going away now. I think we collectively in the West have broken the shield of anti-Semitism, which is why they're going to begin prosecuting now in the United States, because what do you do when people can't be shamed? Oh, he's an anti-Semite. Like every time I hear Shmuley say that on Piers Morgan, he's a rabid anti-Semite, I say, but that doesn't mean anything anymore. You're just actually making the case for the person you're debating at this point, because most people can see it for what it is at this point. But he doesn't quite see it. And there's a blindness now in our Hebrew friends, the higher ups, the rabbis, the fully invested ones. I'm not talking about 90% of Jewish people who are just born to this rather odd antique culture that goes back 6,000 years and is largely indoctrinated through mothers, grandmothers, and rabbis. I'm not,
Hmm.
and they become liberal and reform Jews. They become people like Jon Stewart and Adam Sandler and so on and so forth. That's not the kind of Jew I'm talking about. I'm talking about the really scripturally, first of all, to be fully invested in the Jewish narrative is, at this point, in my estimation, is to openly confess psychosis. Okay. You're basically Shmuley, every time he does an interview now, he's confessing to be a psychotic. He's
Hmm.
providing through his own words and his own behavior prima facie evidence that this
Hmm.
culture is going into a cultural psychosis.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
And,
Yeah, but that,
which takes away something very interesting, the idea that psychotics are genetically derived. No, psychosis can be induced.
hmm.
It's being induced now. And there were a few brave commentators who came out during the lockdowns and explained how this was the induction into mass psychosis. So
Yep,
I would
yep.
say I would say that Judaica is going into full psychosis now, because the way
Yeah,
God doesn't work the way the rabbis say. Okay?
yeah. Yeah, yeah. I look, the reason I bring up the David Icke and the reptilian is even though it's not brought up in Cliff's latest blog, and he titles it The Fall of the Objective, and he brings up some points that I think he's kind of, sort of wandering, but that's not the point. The point is that he brings up something that I think is very relevant, is that they always have a way of introducing something novel, new, that distracts and overrides the issue that was on the edge of being truly understood and resolved. He brings up this three-eye atlas issue, but he kind of,
What is
as he
that,
does,
Santo?
bring that is this asteroid that is, they don't know whether it's an asteroid or but it's a foreign body that's coming into our solar system or close to it. That again is a little bit being used like they have been always in the past. But there are aspects of truth to other civilizations traveling through the galaxies having an influence in this solar system or galaxy. So they have the ability, because I think with the combination of AI, you look at the early attempts to distort our reality with Project Bluebeam and various projects to basically distort our natural reality. So as we go into this thinning of the veil of the fourth dimensional forces, this kind of synthetic universe here is able to be manifested. And
Yeah,
so in the process of manifesting it, whether it's through ritual or whether it's through science or the technology that they got access to now, going more down the grey path or whatever, there is in the background this reptilian story that has been there in the past, and like you say, was way before 1947 or whenever he says it was, sort of introduced by the Nazis or deals. It's been around for a long time and it may still be there. And so David Icke's onto something, but we haven't connected the dots. And when
yeah,
they introduce these things like the Three-Eye Atlas, they are signaling to us that there's something out there that's going to change the way we behave and think down here. Now, wouldn't it be, pretty kind of ironic if they go, oh, it happens to be the reptilians and they're visiting
yeah,
us, or whatever they say. The point is, they've always got a trick up their sleeve. And I
yeah.
just feel that this three-eye atlas is being set up to be used as the big issue to go, oh, just like Trump said, why are we still talking about this guy Epstein? We've got bigger. But when he said that, he didn't have a big issue that was bigger than the Epstein.
Yeah.
Whereas I think if they bring in the alien agenda,
Well, he
that
had
will
the he
blow.
had the te he had the Texas floods.
Yeah, but that wasn't big enough. Yeah,
No.
it's like it's just a flood. We have one of them
And and
every
and to
day.
answer his rhetorical question, we're still talking about this, Donald, because a society that does not protect its children is a doomed society. That's why.
Yeah, which that was the ultimate kind of signal that they realized he screwed up. He realized he screwed up. So they have to engineer
But
something bigger.
everything he does gives us, the pedestrian, more truth. He's divinely afflicted so that even when he tries to lie, he just displaces more truth into the public. I can't believe they're not getting more frustrated with him in the control meetings.
Yeah. Well, I think it is part of the factional game to handle or be handled. And I feel there's a lot of frustration in the back rooms about who's the handler and who's being handled and how that should be managed. In other words, this concept of agency now is completely off the charts. And ironically, Cliff, in one of his recent podcasts, brings up the concept of agency, but he does it in an inverted way, which goes to show how he mixes up and is mixed up with the concept of free will and the concept of agency.
Yeah,
And he actually flips it. It's
yeah,
quite like, are you serious? You mixed up. And that's what I mean by if the cliffs themselves are confused on this concept of handlers, handling, agency, they know they can have hidden layers. Now, There are hidden layers on the planet, obviously,
Yeah.
handling or as handlers. But what's going on off-world, and what's the relationship to the hidden ones here? And how are they now proceeding? Because they're kind of getting a little bit desperate for the big play. In other words, if we woke up tomorrow and the papers are like, Three-Eye Atlas, there is a landing of these beings on the North Pole, everyone would forget about Epstein. Everybody like, what does this mean? Right?
Yeah.
So they know it's a big call. And they talked about this in the past, but they haven't been able to pull it off yet. And they know that the climate change thing is getting a bit wobbly. All the big fear campaigns that are a combination of fear and distraction are starting to become wobbly. And they're like, shit, we got to think of something that really, really pulls off fear and distraction. And aside from something drastic like actual evidence of another civilization that ties to historical facts, a little bit like a biblical story,
Yeah.
that captures everybody's imagination. They go, oh my God. In other words, how do they twist it? Because even the Vatican has been murmuring about aliens for the last couple of years. They're trying to shift their kind of stories into that field. So where's it going? Right? And will they be able to successfully pull it off as the ultimate distractive tactic in this current environment? You know what I mean?
Excellent.
Where's David
Excellent.
Oakes?
You want to wind it up there? I think that's about my usual 50 minutes.
Yeah, no, it sounds
Thank
good,
you very
Bruce.
much, Santo. And
Thank you.
I really enjoyed this conversation. And when I talk to somebody, it brings things out of me that might not otherwise come out when I'm doing a solo podcast. I really enjoy the opportunity to, on occasion, do a conversational podcast. Now, I extend the invitation to all listeners of the Talamanca Review. If you want to do a podcast, send me a message directly on Substack. And remember, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I don't have to post it live. It's recorded first and then posted. But we'll know in the first 20 minutes or so whether it's worth doing or not. And don't if it isn't, don't worry. At least you tried. But a lot of you have a lot of questions. If you just want to talk to me for 10 minutes and record it, that's fine too. And what I'll do is when I get five of them, I'll do five short interviews or five feedback loops for a 50-minute podcast on people who enjoy the Talamanca Review and why they enjoy the Talamanca Review. So with that said, I bid you adieu. This is Bruce McDonald. This has been the Talamanca Review. Thanks again, Santo.
Thank you.